Welcome to another episode of Living with FASD, an education, information, and human interest show for those living on the spectrum, the fetal alcohol spectrum, their loved ones, and anyone else wanting to learn about this particular form of neurodivergence. So today I want to introduce to you someone with whom I made fairly recent acquaintance. And, there's just certain people that are just so special. And I get the image that keeps coming to mind is Mary and Martha sitting at Jesus's feet, right? One's off doing, the act of doing, and the other is just like, it's time to be a sponge. Well, folks, this morning, or whenever you're listening or watching this episode of Living with FASD, it is time to be a sponge. This morning, well, I say morning because when I'm recording this, it's 7 o'clock in the morning, and I still have a whole day ahead of me. But I want to introduce you to Antonia Rathbun Lindsey. She's a retired registered art therapist, a board certified child and family therapist, and credentialed disabilities and minorities specialist who's written a book for professionals and parents called Parenting Your Porcupine. Oh, take that in. Parenting Your Porcupine. How many people are saying yes? And this book is a toolkit for working with children with FASD or other drug effects and neurodiversity. She discusses a diathesis stretch approach. So she's going to tell us what that word means. And it's an approach to attunement, authenticity, and attachment using art therapy and sensory-based communication and active repair strategies, gleaned from 30 years of working in the first wave of research and clinical interventions with foster adoption, kinship, and recovering birth families of young children to young adults with neurotoxin exposure and trauma in treatment, outpatient mental health, and culturally based community programs. She was late deafened and physically disabled by a progressive genetic condition 25 years into her career, has lived experience with neurodivergence and invisible differences. She joins us from her studio in France, where she paints, writes, and provides consultation on Zoom in English, German, French, ASL or American Sign Language, and, to use her words, bad Dutch.
Really bad.
So first of all, I'm kind of jealous that you are so easily and, fluently monolingual, even if your Dutch is rusty compared to the others, because I took Spanish for 5 years back in high school. Of course, that ended back in 1978. And now, very basic stuff, but enough to know when my translator's not telling me everything. I do.
That's a lot, because we do rely on translation programs, and Google. I got to put in a plug for DeepL, DEEPL.
Okay.
It's a German program, but it's so much better. It gets idioms better. I can't live without it. I'm okay in those languages, but I still need, for technical things, I still need DeepL.
Is that an app that we can do on our phones?
It is DeepL, DEEPL. I was told about it by another expat who lives here in France. She's British, and she told me about it, and really, it's a lifesaver.
All right. Well, I'm definitely going to do that, because most of the families I train are bilingual. So I don't think I would like to be able to print out a more accurate translation when I generate all the handouts for trainings and stuff at my part-time job. So, all right, let's dig in. Parenting Your Porcupine. First off, what a perfect word image. Because when we get overwhelmed with stuff, which can happen a lot, I'll admit it, then yeah, we have your phrase, bristle attacks. I don't know why I was thinking quill attacks, right? Bristle attacks sounds better. But that, I mean, we poke people, you know, in defense.
Not on purpose.
Right? In self-defense. We're just trying to take care of ourselves, and we're being a pain in the butt. and in someone else's butt, because they've inadvertently gotten our hackles up.
That's the thing, is it's inadvertent. It's reflex. It's reflex.
Yeah.
It's not chosen behavior. It's reflexes.
Yeah.
Thank you for the beautiful introduction and the gracious words. And as I'm sitting and watching you, I am looking back over time and thinking how fortunate I was to be able to have the experiences of meeting so many people and learning so much from them, because I got to be the learner. I really got to be the learner. And the phrase, the image of porcupine, let's start with that. The image of porcupine came about. Why? Because of a little boy that was in a group. I had a group of kids with FASD who came to the clinic where I was practicing. And they called themselves the muscular mice, which I thought was really kind of charming and wonderful. And he had drawn an image of a mouse with big bristles like that, and it was a porcupine. So his mouse was experiencing the muscular mice. His little mouse, it wasn't a mouse. He was porcupine, and what he was doing was he would use the imagery. He would draw the things that he couldn't say, and that happens a lot. I'm an art therapist. People often can show what they can't say. It bypasses the problem of alexithymia.
Right, which is the topic that we had on last week's episode, was all about alexithymia. Right.
Yeah. Well, art therapists, we're lucky people. We think in pictures, a lot of us. And so we communicate in pictures back and forth with kids and adults. All people with all different kinds of conditions and in all different kinds of experiences of their lives.
Yeah.
But he drew this porcupine, and he would get bristle attacks. And when he got bristle attacks, he got stuck. Basically, he got stuck. He would behave aggressively. He was really prickly, and sometimes he would behave intrusively or aggressively with other kids in the group, with his sibling. His parents were really, really lovely people, and they had, like many parents, they'd been told with enough patience and love,
or he'll grow out of it.
He'll grow out of it.
Or you're a bad parent.
They were early enough in the process. They'd been with the kids long enough that they really felt them and knew their kids pretty well.
Yeah.
And they tried a lot of things. They were loving parents. They were creative parents. They weren't just expecting these kids to fit a cookie cutter kind of, we've adopted you, now shape up. They weren't like that. Oh, they were really
and that's why I had
were really lovely like that, who had tried everything they knew how, and all kinds of things that people hadn't suggested. They were searching vigorously.
Right. And that's what our parents do all the time. And yet when they go into therapy, or they get passed from one therapist to another because the therapists are feeling incompetent and unable to make the changes that are desired, eventually it gets to the point where the therapists are saying, well, you're doing it wrong because these techniques work.
Well, and they may work on neurotypical people. They may work in some situations of neurotypical people, but they don't seem to be a good fit for the kids that I saw and the families that I saw.
Yeah.
And so following the children's lead in art therapy, I got to really use visual strategies for communication.
Mm-hmm.
And what we found was that we could, instead of trying to stop the behavior, stop the symptom, what we needed to do was notice the symptom and use it as the big marker. Aha, wait, this is where there's a mismatch between the child in their body culture and the environment and what is being demanded of this person.
So
the mismatch in the body culture was the big deal. And so body culture became the approach that this little boy's pictures opened up. Was, if you think about the difference between a puppy and a porcupine has different reflexes in terms of when things come close to it, how it handles things that set off its alarm system.
Yeah.
And that's a body culture issue in relation to the animal and their environment.
Yeah.
And I really approached things from that perspective, and the kids taught me a lot about what was different, not because I stopped their behavior, but because we followed it through the artwork back into words. Because in alexithymia, words and sensate, the feelings in the body and the words for those uncouple.
Yeah.
And so everything is there, but how do you get it across? This is where I am, this is where I'm stuck. And those reflex behaviors, the bristle attacks, the mean mouth attacks, the aggression or the withdrawing that was more extreme than other kids, that's what we had to find a way to calmly contain and follow to see where the mismatch was.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm glad you circled back to kind of throw that in with alexithymia, as a good follow-up, an excellent follow-up to last week's episode. But could you define for everybody here listening or watching today what you mean a little more thoroughly about body culture?
Yeah.
Because I think that's a concept that most people have not heard before.
In our conversations, you and I have centered on that a lot. And
but my listeners have not.
Right. It remains a big thing. When we say diathesis stress approach, a diathesis is a physical difference in how one's body is working in the surrounding environment. It's a physical difference. It can have to do with the brain. It can have to do with the pancreas. It can have to do with several organs or systems. But what it means is that person's constitution is more fragile in relation to a stress load. So diathesis stress is the problem of having a constitutional difference that makes us more vulnerable to certain stressors. The dose, the frequency, and the intensity of those stressors has a collapsing effect on the person's ability to function as they like to function.
So I'm thinking of like sensory processing issues.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. When the brain is functioning differently, stress load for the sensory world, the waterfall of stimulation that people adapt and habituate to and navigate all the time, it's very different for someone with a non-localized closed head injury. Or a localized closed head injury. But in terms of fetal alcohol syndrome, we're talking about neurotoxin exposure, which has created a non-localized head injury scenario, if you will.
Right. It's not localized, like it's not a small region. It's more like an IED has gone off in the brain.
It's a chemical clonk on the head.
Yeah.
It's a chemical clonk on the head.
Yeah.
And after a chemical clonk on the head, you can still grow, progress, evolve, but you can't go back to how you used to be, because the used to be what you don't know what that was.
Right.
You don't know what that was, and that's the difference between how people think about head injuries. Oh, we treat head injuries. Well, how did the person do before? In this case, we don't know how they would have done before, because we didn't have baseline. So really thinking about the chemical clunk on the head, for me, it became, wait a minute, there's a difference here. There's a physical difference.
Mm-hmm.
Where is it causing the problem? And all I had to do was follow where the bristle attacks were to see where there was a big mismatch between something in the sensory environment, the load of the stressors, either the frequency, the dose, the intensity, something about that was causing a disconnect. And instead of stopping it or punishing it or trying to block that out, no, that's where we need to focus, because that's where we see where the mismatch is. Now, what can you do? You can modify things. You can approach it this way or this way or this way. You can go over, under, around, and through. That's
until you find what works.
Where? How are we going to do that? What's going to work for the porcupine?
Yeah, I think I would like to invite everybody to take just a moment as you listen to us and recall situations that you yourself have been in where all of a sudden you were overwhelmed in your environment.
That's perfect.
Right? Because it's something that happens to every human being from time to time. The challenge, though, is, for someone living with FASD, is it happens all the freaking time.
If you're in a waterfall of it, it's one thing if someone splashes you with a bucket of water.
Yeah.
It's another thing to be living in a waterfall.
Yeah, running in and out is different from not being able to get out of it.
That is totally, that's the fact right there.
Yeah.
And since you can't look at the person necessarily and see that there's a physiological difference at play. And if one has lived in the situation of the kids are used to looking at adults, around them, adults, parents, teachers, whatever. And if we can know when they're supposed to wake up, when they're supposed to go to the bathroom, when they're supposed to put their clothes on, when they're supposed to eat, when they're supposed to go to school, when they're supposed to come home, if we can see when all of that's supposed to happen and how it's supposed to work, how can we not know when they're having headaches or pain or cramps in their hands or various physical signs of stress? Their stress threshold has been exceeded.
How can we know so much and be so smart and not be able to read their minds?
And not know that. And they don't know that what we may see is a blank affect. What we see may be word finding problem. What we see may look like the person shutting down or having a bristle attack, meaning, ouch, something's just going, oops, no, okay, overwhelm. Alarm, the alarm just went off. Body alarm. No, stop.
So,
but without a way to see the signal and recognize what it means, bridge that to words, some kind of self-help script. So all of those things are possible. And that's where we went with the art, was to first get at what was happening in the body. The alarm went off. What was going on in the body? Where's the person's body?
So what kinds of prompts would you give the children? And so, I see that you're upset right now. Let's put it on paper. And what kind of prompts do you give them to get them to be able to express it in their drawing?
Well, one of the things that I did was, from the beginning, I had a physical environment that began before the drawing. As an art therapist, I set up my room in a very interesting way because I was working with kids who had neurological differences. And so I set my room up so that I had different ways to control the amount of the dosing of the lighting in the room and the dosing of spaces. So there were zones that were very open and there were zones that were enclosed and had accommodations like a half-filled beanbag chair and pillows and a weighted blanket, things like that in certain zones, so that kids had a range of environments that they could pull into for their physical comfort zones. It wasn't just a standard office where everybody sits in a certain chair and everything with words. I had a whiteboard, I had art supplies available. And so before anything else, I would introduce kids into the room and let them adjust the physical room environment to get themselves in the just right place. I'd say, everybody, when people come to counseling, it's helpful if they can get their body comfy. So you can adjust the lights, you can have them bright like this, you can have them at 30%, which looks like this. Here's how you do it. And oftentimes what these kids would want was they would want any overhead lighting, they'd want it down to about 30%. They'd use indirect lighting, turn up the rheostats on those lights so that there was ambient side lighting, but not direct overhead visual, all of this.
Yeah. So I'm thinking right now, all the parents listening could run out and put dimmer switches on their kids' bedroom.
There you go. Yeah. Things like this, these little things, but you add them all up and you get the waterfall effect or the relief from the waterfall effect. By the time we look at dialing in the sensory environment of a physical space where kids come to regroup, whether in my case it was the office because we were dialing in problems and solutions, but at home families are talking about how do I make an environment that's truly comforting, restful, and allows my child to regroup in the way that works for them. That can be harder than it looks because people want to provide a pretty environment or whatever. It can be harder than it looks to dial in an environment for the physical body with a stress threshold difference. So
I'm thinking about my training with facets and to illustrate this idea of environment. There was a picture of a bedroom that had been decorated with Laura Ashley.
There you go.
Right? I mean, back in the 80s, she was so popular. I mean, it was floral everywhere, but there was so much that someone with sensory sensitivities would feel absolutely bombarded and compressed and squished by flowers, which are soft.
The visual overstimulation is the issue. Visual overstimulation. And it's interesting because some kids need a lot of visual overstimulation and some kids need much, much less of it. They dislike high contrast. They want soft. They don't want black and white. Some kids are drawn to high contrast. Some kids want low contrast. Some kids mix between the two. So dialing in an environment can take a little while and it's worth its own conversation. But when it came to providing an instruction in the art, when I would go from the room to here's what we're going to do now, first they would start in their cozy spot. And then I would try and serve up the art in an invitation for them to use paper or sculpture, depending on which they favored. And I had it so that I could serve it up like an art picnic. I could put it right there where they were, and they could use it right there in their cozy spot. They could get their body comfy, and then they could use the art materials. And I didn't say very much. I said, what kind of weather did you have today? How was your day? Show it to me like weather. What kind of weather was it? For example. And maybe they'd make a weather report. For example, or I'd say, well, how's your body doing? They'd make, and that's how the porcupine came about. How's your body doing? Out came the porcupine with his bristles up like this. Oh, look, his hair's up like that. There he was. Suddenly when we're looking at the art, we're not looking eye to eye. We're both looking at the art. I can talk to the art. I can interview the art. I'm not putting him in the visual headlights of having to have more visual stimulation with human face and respond with words, because he can't. If his bristles are up, what he needs shielding from more visual input. That's what that tells me. So we're looking at the art together. He's on the whiteboard. There, he can easily control the stylus. He had neuromotor differences in how his hands would hurt after a day of schoolwork. He had agony in his hands from trying to hold his pencil and write, because he would hold it too hard. He had neuromotor problems with his hand. He
Proprioception issues.
Exactly. Yeah. And so he's using the whiteboard so he can use trunk stability. He can move his hand easily because the markers glide easily on the surface.
Yes. Yeah.
So
and they're fatter.
They're bigger. Yeah. And so there were a lot of little ways that I could offer things according to where the body was in that moment. Yeah. And that's part of the technologies of being an art therapist. You come to read how the body is and what you can do to help the body pick from the range of expressive media and find a comfy way to use the media so that it's supportive and nourishing, not more painful, more stressful, more demand.
So I find myself wishing that more people who go to school for art therapy could be educated on FASD just the same as I have that wish for traditional modes of therapy.
Completely and totally. And I hope you're the woman to do it. And I'll help. I can, because full disclosure here, I spent my life as an art therapist, but the formal process of the academic world of art therapy, the writing that I did was never discovered by other art therapists, to my knowledge. My efforts to present at conferences were never accepted because I somehow didn't thread the eye of the needle in the American Art Therapy Association. And so I was out doing the work and writing about it and even publishing it, but because it wasn't in the typical journals that they would look at or the typical sources that they went to, an awful lot of people never knew about my work. And I just figured, okay, well, I'm busy doing my job and doing the best that I can with it. And if other art therapists ever want to know about it, they'll pry me out of my cave where I'm busily at work, thanks.
Well,
they'll find me or they won't.
And you have had your nose to the grindstone.
That's my job. I'm doing my job.
Yeah. Antonia, you have had your nose to the grindstone for 30 years, which is the same amount of time I've been practicing also. Our careers started roughly the same time. You've been staying knee deep in the clinical work for decades. And whereas other people who started in FASD the same time you did have gone on and done more of the speaking and training and everything else.
Well, there's enough trouble for everybody to be very busy doing everything that we can.
Right.
But my job was clinical work, and so I stayed there.
You are the best kept secret from that era of FASD pioneers.
That's, you can make me cry. I cry.
So for the listeners and viewers out there, I have had the honor of being asked to preview Parenting Your Porcupine. And one of the dreams that I've had for decades is to teach on the college level, and Parenting Your Porcupine will be my textbook.
Thank you so much.
If I am ever in that position,
that we can make that happen, because what I hope it offers people are some examples of how-tos and what works and solutions, because I was much more interested, quite honestly, in following the neurology and the workarounds that would help the kids. than in researching the prevalence of certain kinds of problems, because the kids that I saw and the people that they grew up into became a wide variety of people with many, many abilities and adaptive skills and gifts and talents and capacity. And that's not the stereotype that we come away from reading research papers with, or come away from conferences with. We come away from conferences with heavy hearts, because people don't discuss the solutions and the strengths as often as they discuss the challenges.
Right. And I think too, one of the issues with that, you know, I think back to an episode that I recorded right around Christmas time. I think it aired in January, but it was a couple. Justin Shepard, he's the producer of the FASD project documentary, a little short 15-minute documentary, and his wife is a researcher, Christina Ubben. She's a researcher at UC Irvine. And
I saw that
you
one.
saw that episode. Yeah.
Beautiful.
So what she said was that in the research sphere, everyone, you know, there's such a hierarchy of what you're allowed to research and the direction that it goes. All your research projects have to get approval. And it's still the old guard who are in charge of how the research is going to shape up. And they're locked into FAS and not the whole spectrum.
Well,
and they're not looking
it's
at
a very
how,
challenging issue. It's a very challenging research.
It is to be fair.
Well, that's one kind of research. There's, but part of the gift. This takes us a little bit into my strange my strange little hike alongside of all of that highway of research that's going on. I was kind of off on the side trails, but who I have to say, I have utmost respect for people who do quantitative research. It's not what my brain is good at. What I was better at was qualitative research. And so in the research program that I was fortunately given funding for, which was a 3-year national level study, I had the great honor of heading a team of people who were much more capable than I was. But because I'm a puzzle solver and a person who brings together disparate elements and tries to see holes, we were able to do that project, which combined research and a clinical program. And Barbara Morse and Heather Carmichael Olson and Jay Edwards and a guy who's dead now, his name Hank Bersani, they were, and Dr. Holly Crossan as well, they were focused on quantitative research. Holly and I focused mostly on the qualitative research angle. And so really those, when we say research is a broad topic, but a lot of families don't necessarily know that. They don't have experience with it. If they work in statistics or mathematics, they will be aware of the wide variety of how research is done and the narrowness of it, the specific of it. But it's complicated. Research is complicated. And so who gets to do what and whether they get to do it and whether an institutional review board allows them to proceed with a study, all these things are very, very, very constrained and very specific. And even who you can cite as references. I mean, I was not an academic. I was out in a clinical setting working as a unauthorized person in terms of academia. I wouldn't have been someone who typically was given a research program. But because it was a demonstration program through the Administration on Children, Youth, and Families, Health and Human Services Administration, they were looking for innovative demonstration projects that were constituency based and constituency informed.
Yeah.
And so that's how it was.
That was your in. Yeah.
I was part of the constituency
Yeah.
who was speaking with research and creating a dialogue to say, really, in terms of learning and applying what we learn, how can we go about this in a community accessible way? So that research isn't this rarefied thing that requires a whole secondary discipline called knowledge transfer to take things formal scientific studies to applied knowledge that the public can use. That's called knowledge.
That's your genius.
Well, I didn't know.
That's your genius, is being able to transfer that knowledge and to be able to phrase things in a way that the rest of us can wrap our heads around all that academia language, right? My mind is very inquisitive and research oriented in terms of there's got to be a way to figure this out, to look at this, to figure it out, to get the answers. But
You do the brilliant part of asking good questions, and that's where everything starts.
And I just have to trust that someone else will pick those questions up and run with them.
What we do is we try the right questions to the right parties.
Yeah.
But your questions are brilliant, and basically everybody can do science, because and that's what parents are actually doing in terms of what is found in the Parenting Your Porcupine. Why I call it a toolkit is that really parents have something that no one else has, and that's time span data.
Yes,
that's time span data. Parents don't know that they have time span data because they don't call it that. They call it lived experience.
Yeah.
But time span data about how differently a child reacts to the dose, the frequency, and intensity of stressors in the course of a typical day. All of that can be turned into data that can be shared, but it doesn't get easily accepted by professionals or experts.
No.
As data, when we share it in the form of narrative, when we share it in the form of story. When a parent comes in and says he's having tantrums all the time, that's one way of saying it. What I discovered from working with the kids, working with the families, and brokering that gap between the research and how people were trying to describe it, is that the parents were actually describing episodes.
Yeah.
Not tantrums.
I wonder, and I haven't gotten far enough in your book yet to know.
They were episodes, and they were of exceptional length, duration, and intensity compared to what the professional would typically see. But if a parent says the word tantrum, the professional thinks tantrum, okay, 10 to 30 minutes. Ooh, that was a big, okay, the child is easily hyper aroused. They're kind of a worked up kid. Okay, what can the parent do? And then they hand them typical strategies that work to calm that for neurotypical kids who have tantrums, who don't have episodes. What the families I worked with and what the kids I worked with were bristle attacks, episodes that were exceptionally strong, of long duration. They would go on a long time. They could happen anywhere from 30 minutes of being upset to 45 minutes or an hour. It took them a lot longer time to regroup and recalm and collect themselves. And it was the world of episodes, not tantrums. It was the world of bristle attacks, involuntary stress reactions, not just getting mean or mad at somebody and then getting over it.
So I haven't read far enough in your book yet, but I'm curious if you get to a place where you provide, since it's a toolkit, do you provide for parents the language that they need to accurately convey what's going on to the professionals who seemingly speak a different language?
They do speak a different language, and they're used to, you and I have had separate conversations because we both live with physical conditions, about the difference between horses and zebras in a medical setting. The joke. Do you want to tell the joke, and I'll piggyback off of you?
So if you hear hoofbeats, then look for the horses.
because a lot of physicians don't see that many rare syndromes come through their door. You live with a rare syndrome. I live with a rare syndrome, but people didn't see it. They didn't see it. And in the particular rare syndrome I live with, actually the symbol of the disease is a zebra, because that's what they chose for the disease. Because we look symmetrical like someone else in a typical body, but our innards, what's inside the skin suit, is really quite different than how other bodies are constructed, and it causes us a ton of problems. But on the outside, it's invisible. You can't see it from the outside unless you see the person right in the middle of contortionism, and then you think, my God, what's wrong with that person? How can they bend that way? What's wrong with them? But that's just the hallmark of my zebraism. It's different for but that phenomena of how do you call what's different? How do you phrase it? When parents are in a doctor's office saying, my child is having trouble with this, what they're doing is they're bringing their lived experience and saying, you told me to do this strategy to extinguish the behavior, but it just goes on and on. He doesn't calm down when I do that. There's no extinction burst. He doesn't ever calm down. And no, it doesn't work like that. He will pick holes in the mattress. He will punch holes in the wallboard. He'll scrape and dig holes. He can't sleep at night. He's agitated, and it doesn't just, he's bouncy, he's hyperactive. He's agitated and he can't calm his own self. He cannot do it. It's a can't, won't. And this is how fixed and severe it is. And this is when it seems to happen during the course of the day. And this is what it looks like. So we built a way to build a stress map and a strengths map that became a method for the families to say, here's what's working well. Here's an example of what's not working well. And here's how much it's affecting our daily life. And so we built a methodology for that, for them to be able to broker that information differently with professionals. The other thing we did, and the worst part about the book, is there's a glossary to it, because trying to help parents have terms that get through to the professional. For example, with language problems, the child can talk, maybe talk the hind leg off a dog, but maybe using circumlocution or have fluent aphasia. What do those words mean? Circumlocution, the child can talk all around it, but not get to the point. I call it talking all around the plate. They can talk, but they can't necessarily summarize and get to a point. Some kids have that. Some kids have fluent aphasia. So they have a collection of different language differences. So that though they can talk, they can't necessarily express their ideas very succinctly when asked to by a teacher or a parent, especially when there's stress. I have to answer. Or they may have a word finding difficulty, anomia, for example. The children that I saw often would use word pictures. And then mom was driving and we saw the pullover guy. Who's the pullover guy? Well, imagine a police car that pulls somebody over to the side of the road. The child couldn't find the word policeman, but you know what he meant, the pullover guy. With the blue, he's wearing blue, and he pulled the pullover guy. Well, if you think in pictures, it's clear as a bell. But if you don't think in pictures, you're like, what? You're not making sense. What? Huh? And depending on the parents, and depending on how urgent the situation is that they've got to resolve with the child, whatever behavior is. And
I think that's one point of genius, right?
Stuck.
Is to help parents learn to think in pictures so that we can enter their world. Right?
Well,
or each other's world, because we grow up and become adults.
And they're still there. A person can still get bristle attacks. As an adult, in which case, how does a partner handle it? Is the partner going to personalize it? Are they going to come back at you with even more words so that the stress level just gets bigger and bigger? And finally, it's like steam in a kettle. It's like, stop.
Yeah. Yeah.
Go away. Go away. Go on with your bad self. No. La 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 la. Are you done yet?
I'm just imagining me doing all that. It looks different in every household, but I mean, the dynamics are real. You know, it's like one of the things that I read in your book was about families that have more than one neurodiverse kid, right? And so each of them have different triggers for their bristle attacks. And it's about working with the family over time. It's not a quick fix to figure out how to work with each other so that you can have, so that everyone's not poking each other. And we have the same dynamic with marriages, you know, when those of us grow up, you know, because so often patterns of interaction that continue to be the same become ingrained. And so it takes time to undo that and learn how not to poke each other.
Yeah. Well, it brings up another little short gizmo that we came up with in all those years of work, and that was swap, not stop. How we can swap to something and then dial things down instead of imagining that we can stop something in the moment. Sometimes it's really about recognizing someone else has a bristle attack. What can I swap to? Oh, they're in a bristle attack. This isn't, oh wait, they're in distress. This isn't an, oh wait, I don't have to personalize this. This, oh wait, ooh, okay, they're not comfortable. Something's off, they're not comfortable. Just to be able to have that moment where it occurs to us, okay, I can't have my way. Oh wait, someone else is uncomfortable. You're really uncomfortable. Oh. Let me slow the roll. Let me slow my roll. Because before we can interact in some way, we've got to attune the person I'm with is in a moment of real discomfort here.
Yeah.
That's a different lens.
And I'm noticing
Emotional
that in this, you have been demonstrating changing pitch and cadence and tone, slowing everything down.
The kids taught me, what they taught me was, it was totally by accident. I have by nature kind of a soft voice, and it's because of the abnormality that I live with in my body. I have a really abnormal vagal tone in my body. And the good news and bad news is I don't project very much in my speaking voice. Now, if I'm singing, I learned how to do that. But it's not natural to me. My natural voice is about like this. This is my regular voice tone. And so when kids come into the room, I'd be talking to them about like this. And the kids would always say, they would say these sweet things like, oh, hi, Antonia. Antonia, like an auntie. I just love that. I could hear back then. I don't hear now, but I could hear back then, and I'll never forget that. Antonia. And so they would come into Antonia's room, and the parents all said, if I could just talk like you, because apparently my volume and pitch were different. And I also learned that with male people, if I lower my pitch, especially when I'm upset, if I lower my pitch, they don't escalate as much. If I begin to show my pitch, that's a really bad fit for many males. They register that pitch, and it's enervating. It's annoying. It's noxious. And especially if they have hyperacusis, it's not a good fit. So I learned that when kids are really upset, I drop my pitch. I go down to my alto pitch. I wouldn't be up in my drop my pitch and phrase things a little differently, slower. I do slower back and forth. I'd leave more space in the reciprocity. in the pace.
Yeah.
So pitch, tempo, tone, the reciprocity would shift because they were uncomfortable. And my job was to find out what's uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And I can't find out if I'm making it
right.
If I'm escalating it.
Yeah. And I think that
I had to dial down to get there with them.
Yeah. I think that's probably the number one tactic, no matter what the relationship, right?
It is. It is. It could be the pool I came from, because I had to get low. In a pool, when we're in water, we automatically shift between parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous system. We experience a shift in our brain function and how we function. And so that kind of stuff makes a difference as technology for parents when they're escalating and they're concerned, how they can drop down into a place where they can be the safe magnet to draw their child back from whatever it is they don't want them to do.
One of my favorite analogies that you have in Parenting Your Porcupine so far is for parents to be the pool, right? Because when we're floating in a pool, it's so relaxing. And if we are the pool, then we are that container that can bring relaxation for our kids, for our spouse, right? For whoever we're in, whoever is distressed, we can be that pool. One of the other word pictures that you used was seaweed. Seaweed is out there in the ocean, much as we are in the midst of all this stimuli, but it is anchored and it is literally held by the water.
And it's flexing. It's not rigid. It's firm. I mean, if you ever try and swim through a bed of kelp, it's not easy. It will hold you there.
Yeah.
But it's not gripping you or rigid like a set of bars. It's just slower and slower. You have to go through it slowly. And to be the pool, it was a way that parents could kind of learn some simple techniques to come down into their center, to kind of go down into their feet instead of staying up in the anxious place in their head, verbalizing her.
Yeah. And I think after being the pool for a few minutes, then we can emerge from that pool as the parent or as the spouse, whatever. We can emerge from that pool as the scientist and really question what brought that bristle attack about.
That's absolutely brilliant, because in that moment of getting down out of the escalation, we become receptive. We move from expressive to receptive again.
Yeah.
And when we're in our receptivity, we can get back to being curious. What's missing here? What am I missing? I'm missing something.
What's the missing information that we need?
Help me understand. And we can say, help me understand. And then we can let them pour. They can spew it like toads. I'm spewing toads. They can have a mean mouth attack. They can spew toads. They can have steam coming out of the kettle, but we're not reacting. We're just abiding.
Yeah.
Letting them get it out. Without adding more fuel to the fire.
Yeah. Or your other phrase that you use that is hysterical, but beautiful at the same time. Coughing up a fur ball.
Coughing up a hairball. Yep. Yep. Well, they've got to cough up the hairball there. They're trying to get it out. And, this is where we really can just drop down and know that they're doing their best to get it across to us.
Yeah.
It's not coming out perfectly. So what? Yeah. What we need is the information. Yeah. What we need to know is where they are.
Yeah.
And if no one in the moment, hey, I'm over here and I'm stuck.
Yeah.
That's the big opportune moment. That's the ready, talk about the ready moment, it's not to change where they are, it's to know where they are. Oh my gosh, if we can just know where they are, that alone changes everything.
Everything. Yeah.
Everything. I've got to know where you are. I didn't know you were over there. Oh my God, I didn't know it was so hard.
Yeah.
How different is that?
Yeah.
For a parent and a child, or for between spouses.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I'm here. I'm here. And
yeah. Well, Antonia, I feel like I'm interrupting something that is beautiful and fascinating, but we've been talking for an hour.
There we go.
And unfortunately, I have to take off my podcast host hat and put on my social worker hat and go to work.
Well, make it a good day. And thanks for the privilege of the shared conversation.
For all the listeners and viewers out there, I'm just absolutely delighted because Antonia has already agreed to be a frequent guest. So, as you can tell, we enjoy each other's company. We enjoy the way each other's mind works. And hopefully everyone listening and watching will benefit from that as the free exchange of ideas comes. Between the two of us, we have over 60 years of practice. And, hopefully we'll change a few lives together.
Well, everybody's invited to take what they need and leave the rest.
Yes.
Oh,
yeah.
That's the beauty of your podcasts.
Oh, thank you.
So thank you, and love to everyone out there.
Yeah. So everyone, thank you for tuning in. I hope you found today fascinating. Please write Living with FASD podcast at gmail.com with any questions that you have for Antonia. For when she comes back, hopefully it won't be too terribly long from now. Any comments, please share any stories that you have about, oh my goodness, this insight made such a difference for my family, right? Whether, it's between you and your partner, or you and your boss, or you and your child. Let us know if today made a difference. Let us know what questions you have for when we pick this conversation back up again. And feel free to, and also know that at some point we will be delving into the weeds with Parenting Your Porcupine, the book, because I tell you, as I read her work on every single stinking page, I have light bulbs going off. And so it's so good. It's so powerful. I cannot wait until it launches and all of you can get your own copy. So it, I truly am.
Thank you so much.
I truly am excited about this work. So, and grateful for this time together. Can't wait till the next time. It's been a delight and a joy. Everybody, thank you for tuning in this week. Please come back next week, next Monday, for another episode of Living with FASD.